podcast that ignites the creative fire within. I'm your host, Saima, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Leigh Shulman, acclaimed writer, mentor, and best-selling author of The Writer's Roadmap. With over 20 years of experience guiding writers across the globe, Leigh empowers storytellers to overcome self-doubt, embrace self-expression, and craft lives aligned with their creative purpose. From publishing in the New York Times to leading retreats in Argentina, Lee proves that the writing life isn't just about words, it's about courage, clarity, and connection. So, Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Saima. It's great to meet you.
Oh, same here. You're warmly welcome all the time. So, Lee, you have mentored so many writers. So, what do you think stops people from telling the stories in the first place?
Well, I think there are three things that stop people from telling their story. A, they feel like their story is not good enough, and there's this desire to be perfect, whatever perfect means, because I don't really think it means anything. I think the other side of it is they feel like their story is not good, like that nobody wants to hear what they have to say, which also, in my experience, that's not true. Even a story that a lot of people understand and a lot of people have lived, even if it's part of the story, that's even more reason for people to want to hear it because people want to see themselves and they want to know that they're not alone. And then I think sometimes there's fear and shame of telling the story, which is a lot of that is about finding people who support you, having a community around you, and just having people around you who will support you and listen to you without judgment.
Hmm. So, how do you help someone move past that initial fear of, like, who am I?
Well, I think the first step anyone can take when they want to start writing, I think it's just sit down, get a pen and paper, sit down and set a timer and write for 10 minutes and free yourself from any obligation to write anything in particular. You can just say, I'm going to write on a piece of paper and see what happens. And I do this quite often. I do this all the time, actually, in my workshops or when I'm working with somebody one on one. And I do this in my retreats, where it's almost like you're just throwing somebody into the deep end of the pool and it's sink or swim. And I think it feels that way in the beginning. So I'll even say if you don't have anything to say and the only thing that you're writing is this is the stupidest writing exercise I've ever done in my life, that's okay. Write that down. Or I can't think of anything. Write it down because in my experience, when you sit there, particularly when you're doing it with somebody else, if I'm on Zoom with somebody or I'm sitting in the room with somebody, somehow something happens and you get past that discomfort and you just start writing. And I think that is a great place to start because it teaches you how to get words on paper and it teaches you it's a little bit of an exercise in not judging your own work. And that's key when you're writing.
Mm-hmm. That's such a powerful, friendly reel. It's like you're saying the story matters because it's uniquely ours, right?
Oh, sorry, you cut out just a little bit at the end. I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
Hmm. It's like, you're saying the story matters because it's uniquely ours, and that's really.
Absolutely. I mean, our stories are different than everybody else's because we're different. We see differently. We have different parts of ourselves. And then there's also some overlap between people. And I think that's what connects us. Being human means you have connections with other people.
Absolutely. Now, in your own journey, what moments tested your commitment to writing, and how did you keep going?
Wow. So, I actually have a post that I wrote for media that's called Every Time I Wanted to Give Up on My Book. And that was actually when I was writing the writer's roadmap, where I would write it, it was almost done, it had gone through all these edits. And even when it was almost finished, I considered, well, let's forget about it. Let me just not publish it. No one will ever know. But the reality is, I would know and I was done. I was pretty much finished the book. The only thing I really had to do was was format it and get it ready for publishing. And I kind of thought to myself, like, why would I give up now? And I think that lesson is it taught, it showed me and shows me what happens with so many writers when you want to write and you start and you don't like what you're writing, or you start and you got so much, but maybe you get bad feedback. And there will always be something along the way that will bring doubt. Um, and what that lesson with that one book taught me, and quite frankly, with many articles that I've written, with many different pieces that I've written, stories, articles, pitches, whatever they might be, where I hit a point where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And that makes me want to give up. But each time I continue, I've learned that I feeling like you don't know what you're doing and that you don't know what you're saying is part of the process. And what you just need to do is keep going. It doesn't matter if it's one word on the page or sit down with your notebook and read for 5 minutes or whatever it is. The key is just to keep taking small steps forward.
Ah, that's remarkable. So, was there ever a time you wanted to give up, and what pulled you back?
I think what pulled me back into the writing is often what pulls people back into the writing. The writing, the idea, the story won't leave them alone. So, and I've heard this from so many people. Like, I've had this story since I was 12 years old. I've wanted to write it, or 10 years, 15 years, however long this story has been with the person. And there's just something about it where they think about it again and go, look, I'm gonna work on this again, because I guess you get to the point where you have forgotten the frustration that does come along with writing, and the excitement of the idea holds you again. And so, really, a lot of what I do for people is I sit with them through the discomfort where they want to give up, and we talk about it, and I help them get past it so they can keep going and get back to that excitement. I was working with someone this morning, um, and basically, like, she's had her struggles with her writing and often wants to give up. And today we sat down, and it was a co-working session. I have weekly co-working sessions in the community that I run. And we sat down and we were working, and I noticed it was already past the hour of the time we were meant to be there. But I thought, okay, I'll give it a few more minutes, because I don't like interrupting people when they're working, to tell them to stop if they want to keep going. And then I lost track of time, and suddenly it was 2 hours we'd been sitting there working. And, I asked her how'd it go, and she was like, it went pretty well. And then she had this huge smile on her face where she realized, wow, she'd been writing for 2 hours and she really enjoyed it. And in a lot of ways, that's where I would want to bring people, because if you love the story and you start to love the process, knowing that it's going to have obstacles, knowing that you are going to have times when you feel like you want to give up, that's what brings me back to it. Like, I love writing. I love editing. I really enjoy the process, but it didn't happen overnight to get here. And, anyone who wants to write, I encourage you, when you feel like you're going to, what you want to give up, you've had it, you're just tired of it. Um, reach out to me, contact me, ask me a question, reach out to your community. Just take that step outside of your own brain and away from your own paper to say, like, hey, what's going on here? And get somebody who can sort of help you take care of it to move forward.
Mm-hmm. I love how you're reminding us, it's okay to pause, but not okay to permanently silence our voice, no?
Absolutely. And I would think most people don't want to silence their own voices. I'm a really big believer that we know ourselves really, really well, and our instinct will guide us. The problem is fear and judgment and, anger and all these other emotions will often come in and distract us so we don't remember what we want. Um, you know, but being able to continue to take breaks. And there's times in the writing process, if you're writing a book, there are times that you need to take a break, or even a short story or a shorter piece. You don't want to just be sitting in it day after day after day. Sometimes you want to give yourself a break. But I think sometimes the difference between taking a break and giving up, sometimes it's hard to see the difference and it's hard to see the line until you haven't been writing for a really long time. And that you realize, oh, if I want to start again, I'm going to have to kind of take however many steps back and kind of start some things over and get back into it. Whereas if you're just taking a break, it's much easier to get back into it, and therefore it's also much easier to get back into enjoying it.
I completely agree, Lee. Now, your book, The Writer's Map, lays out steps for creating a writing lives. So, what's one step most aspiring authors overlook?
A step that most aspiring authors overlook. Well, it's a funny thing to say this. I think what a lot of people overlook when they're looking to create a writing life, they don't focus on what it is that they actually want. Because there's so many ways that you can write and so many things that you can do and so much advice out there saying you can't do that. You can't make a living writing. You can't write a book like that. How can you do this? You haven't done, there's just so many voices out there competing that are kind of telling you to say don't do that or it's not a good idea. Um Again, I said this before, I think trust your instinct is always the best advice, whether it's you're in the middle of a book and you're not sure where to go, or you try to figure out what you want to do in your writing life, or you're trying to figure out what's the next thing you're going to write. Listen to yourself and be really honest with yourself about what it is that you want, separate from what the people around you think you should do.
Mm-hmm. So, how can someone, balance the dream of writing with the demands of daily life?
That is an excellent question. So how do you balance life and writing and creativity and just being a creative person? Well, I would say that part of it is that creativity and enjoying your time writing or enjoying the things that you create feeds your life and it gives me energy and I'm excited to be creating this thing. Um, and the truth is, when I'm sort of at the end of a project, I will disappear into my project, and I will work much longer hours than I normally do because I don't want to leave the page. But we have families, we have jobs, we have other things that we're doing in this life. I mean, there are writers who can write full time, but even so, you still have other parts of your life, and and I think the things that we really enjoy doing outside of the writing and outside of the creative process, those are pretty easy. If you love a particular television show or you enjoy going for a walk, like your Sunday dinners with your family, those things are wonderful and continue them. And all the things that you love doing, really lean into them. But then there's, sometimes your job will frustrate you or things break in the house or other things happen and you would love to be able to just not deal with it. Well, how do you balance those two? How do you balance when you have so many different things that you want to do and you want to write? And I think, what I would say is just 10 minutes is an incredible rule because, you know, if you write just 10 minutes, regularly. It could be every day, it could be every other day, it could be what works for you. You're staying connected to the writing process and you're staying connected to your creativity, which means the work that you do each time you sit down is aggregate and it continues and it pulls you forward. And that way, when life gets really, really busy, and I even recommend like maybe do it first thing in the morning, even if it means getting up 5 minutes early and you spend 5 minutes writing. When you do it first thing in the morning, you've written and therefore it highlights the rest of your day. So even when things are frustrating or other stuff happens or you get pulled away, you know that you are still riding the wave of your own creativity.
That's so relatably, especially for anyone like me, juggling for family, work, and that call to write.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think also there's a part in that where don't berate yourself when you don't do things the way you think you should be doing them. Even if you have been writing and you have given up, and, maybe it's, 6 months later or however long later, and you realize, oh, I gave up. Do your best not to, like, I don't think berating ourselves or saying bad things about ourselves or telling us we did the wrong thing. I mean, I wouldn't say that to another person. Why would you say that to yourself? I think that kind of thing demotivates. Whereas, you can say to yourself, well, what happened that I stopped writing? Why? What got in the way? Is it my emotions? And then you deal with your emotions. Is it I was too busy? Or, I have a thing that I have to do with my family every single day at this particular time, and I was trying to write that time. And then you can begin to problem solve and figure out what got in the way of your writing. And that is always going to be more helpful, whether it's writing or it's another area of your life. Telling yourself you did the wrong thing is never going to be as helpful as saying, hey, what do I want to do next time? And how can I get more of what I want by doing what? So just gentleness with yourself also.
Yes, that's going to surely be beneficial for all our listeners and me too, for sure. Now, you know, self-doubt every creative journey. So, how can writers learn to work with the inner critic instead of fighting it?
Ooh, how can you learn to dance with, I would say, with your inner critic? Uh, okay. So the first thing when I was, there's certain things that I repeat over and over. So that just 10 minutes, give yourself 5 minutes in the morning, sit down for 10 minutes and work on your book, you know, and that free writing I was talking about, where you sit down and you just write whatever's on your mind. And there's two kinds of free writing that you can do. One of them is that open free writing that I talked about earlier, where you just sit and write whatever comes out of your head. And it doesn't matter what it is. And like I said, it's a really good way to teach yourself, to train yourself to write without judgment. And then another type of what I call free writing is you have a question and you're answering the question. So maybe it's, I have this idea for a story about a little girl who gets lost out by the river. And then maybe you spend 10 minutes just writing down that story. So that's what I would call a targeted free write, where you have a question and you have a story that you want to write, but you're still writing without stopping, without editing, without judgment. And the more you do that, the more you practice shutting down that internal editor. And then you separate the creation process from the editing process. Now, I actually really enjoy editing because I feel like my first draft is sort of a wet lump of clay. And then with editing, I get to turn that wet lump of clay into something beautiful. That's exactly the form that I want it to be. Um, so separate them. So sometimes you sit down and write, and sometimes you sit down and edit. And that is the best way to keep that internal critic from telling you that everything you're doing is terrible. And the more you practice, the easier it gets. Um, and like editing. One thing I always tell people is a lot of times you'll start to write something, and then you'll sit the next time you sit down, you start at the beginning and you edit what you wrote before, and then you'll pick up, but maybe you'll write a few lines. But really you end up editing the same pages over and over and over. I recommend never to do that. Edit when you're editing, write when you're writing. And if you are editing the first few pages, what you're basically doing is each time you edit, you're creating more possibilities of where the story could go. And by the time you're done, by the time you've done this 4, 5, 6, 7 times, it's impossible to tell the story because you're so caught in those first few pages. So what I really recommend is write. If you want to edit at that point, go and read it, make some very minor edits, but then keep going until you have the first draft of your story finished. Once you have finished the story, then you can go back and read it and let that internal critic say, hey, do I understand this? Does this make sense? Because then what happens when you write and then come back later to edit is you start to see the writing from a distance. And therefore, you're not going to be as mean to yourself, or you might be mean to yourself, but slowly but surely you learn to serve the story and help the story instead of telling yourself you're terrible. So, and you hear like there's a an echo here. Don't judge yourself. Don't tell yourself you're terrible. None of those things are going to help you, right? Instead, do things that really build you. Find the things that you're really good at. Do things where you really enjoy your time, where you feel good, and just treat yourself really well. And that gets rid of the internal critic too.
That's such a compassionate but thank you for reminding us that writing isn't just a solitary act, it's a radical form of self care, self expression, and connection. Friends, if Lee's wisdom resonated with you, check out the Writer's Roadmap and join her inspiring community at leeshulman.com. Until next time, may you find the courage to tell your story and may your words spark the souls of